So once again, good night or good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. I've noticed there's a few more people joining our meeting, but just in the interest of time, we would like to get started here. So as people join, we will be letting them in. So welcome. We're so glad that we've had a great response to this meeting invite today, and hopefully we'll have some more. Just for your information, this meeting is being recorded this evening. So if you have friends or neighbors who would like a recap of what happened this evening, it will be posted on our website probably tomorrow, as well as this presentation. So don't worry about taking notes or taking pictures. You'll have full access to this presentation afterwards. So my name is Ruth Salentich. I do public engagement here at the District of Lake Country. It's a pleasure to facilitate this meeting this evening. We have representatives here from Lake Country who you'll hear from. We have Kyle Wilkie, he's our utilities manager. We have Greg Buchholz, who's our director of utilities. And I've already introduced myself. And we have Nick here, who's also on the water team and controlling our AV. So big thanks to Nick tonight. So the purpose of, we'll just go to the next slide. Thanks. So we've gone through who's here. I'm going to let the Eastside utilities representatives from the province introduce themselves, as they will be presenting first. I'm sorry, I'm just multitasking here, so I'm just going to let a few more people in. There we go. Welcome everyone as you join. So the purpose of tonight's discussion is to provide Eastside utility customers such as yourself with an update. So you'll be hearing from the province of BC right after you hear from me. And then you'll be hearing from Kyle Wilkie, and we'll be reviewing the District of Lake Country's Water Master Plan, along with the challenges that we're facing in Carr's Landing. And we'll also explain the concept of creating a Carr's Landing local service area. So don't worry if you don't understand any of these terms. They are a bit daunting and could be complicated, but we will be going through this and explaining it as well. And I'll just move to my next slide here. We will be asking everyone to mute themselves.
Thank you again.
Oh, welcome. We're just going to ask everyone to put themselves on mute. Also, too, just to save bandwidth, we'll just ask that you please turn off your cameras. We're going to go through the presentations first, and then we will be going to Q&A afterwards. So feel free to save your questions. I will have a slide up shortly here that will show an email address. It's communications@lakecountry.bc.ca. I'll flash that up at the end. But if anyone doesn't feel comfortable raising their virtual hand or asking a question in this group at the end of the meeting, please feel free to send me an email at that email address I just mentioned, and I'll relate it to the presenters tonight. We just want to make sure all questions are answered. And then too, if you think of a question after this evening, feel free to send us an email either at that email address or letstalklakecountry.bc.ca. So a lot of information there. I will recap it later. But with that, I'd like to hand it over to Eastside Utilities. Elena, I think you're online. I believe I saw you. So if you don't mind just taking over and turning on your camera and unmuting yourself, please.
Hi. And thanks, Ruth, for including us in this meeting. My name is Elena Oliphant, and I'm the Chief Financial Advisor. And tonight I'm joined by my colleagues, Chris McMillan, and who is our program coordinator, and Yanan Zing, who is our senior waterworks engineer. And so what I wanted to just do is just to give a bit of background and history of Eastside Utility and a bit about our role as a water utility regulations section. So Eastside Utility is a private water system that's regulated under the Water Utility Act and the Utilities Commission Act, and it's regulated by the Deputy Controller, who is our decision maker. The Deputy Controller is an independent quasi-judicial regulator responsible for regulating privately owned water systems in BC. And currently we regulate about 115 water systems that are located throughout the province. So as staff, the three of us, along with a few other people, our main role is to provide advice, information, and recommendations to the Deputy Controller, who uses that information as part of the decision-making process. So the first certificate of public convenience and necessity, so that was what would have given the authorization for the construction of the Eastside utility, was first in 1979. So that's when that utility was first created. It initially was approved to serve 29 lots. And then between 1980 and 2008, additional authorizations were issued to expand that service area, so that the total area now is up to 158 lots. And currently there are 150 connected customers. So just moving on to the next slide. So in addition to regulating private water utilities, under the Utilities Commission Act, we can seize management of a water system. And that's what happened with Eastside back in 1998. The Deputy Controller authorized seizure of this utility due to mismanagement of monies that were intended to be set aside in reserve funds. So since then, we've provided the management of this system, and we use Access Utility as the contract operator. So they're local to Eastside, and they carry out the operations and maintenance as well as regular water testing. Then we also employ HLW chartered professional accountants to do the billing and accounting services for us, as well as do the year-end financial statements and tax returns. So just to give you a general or current overview of the system, so just moving on to the next slide, we have just a map showing the general service area of Eastside Utility. Now, its main or sole source of supply is Okanagan Lake, and the water is treated with chlorination at the intake pump station, which you can see in the middle of the slide there, circled in green. There are two reservoirs located at the mid and upper sections with pump stations, and there's about 10 kilometers of distribution servicing the area.
Not a lot of people on.
So just going into the study and kind of where we are now today in the next slide. So a few years ago, our senior waterworks engineer worked closely with WSP engineering firm to complete a comprehensive study of the water system. And so the purpose of this study was to determine what the current state of the system is, identifying those deficiencies and identifying what improvements would be needed to meet regulatory requirements. So this study, we worked in consultation also with the district to ensure it would meet their criteria as well as our own design guidelines. And this report was finalized in 2021. So the study identified several deficiencies in the system. With a 43-year-old aging system, infrastructure is nearing the end of its service life and will need replacing. Other issues that it identified were the fire flows are inadequate, storage is insufficient or under capacity. Also, for several years now, there's been a moratorium placed on expanding the service area to either include neighboring properties or subdivision of existing properties. It does not meet interior health surface water treatment objectives, and boil water advisories frequently occur. So just going on to the recommendations from the engineering report. So the report went on to identify what the capital upgrades would be to correct these deficiencies over the next 20 years. And it's important when I'm discussing these recommendations to highlight that these are based on Eastside remaining an independent standalone water system. And the report went on to prioritize these upgrades into the short, medium, and long-term phase. So just to highlight some of the recommendations in the short term, was the first priority it recommended was to complete a new lake intake to extend it further out. That it was projected or estimated to cost about $350,000. The next sort of major upgrade in this next 5 years that it recommended would be to replace the existing wet well and pump station to move that to a higher elevation, and then installing additional treatment for UV and chlorine disinfection. So just to note, the new lake intake project is currently already in the planning stages. So just going on to the goals for the medium and long term. So the engineering report went on to identify several other projects that would be needed. For example, in the next 6 to 10 years, it was recommended that the capacity of the upper reservoir be increased. Pressure reducing stations would be installed. And then longer term, upgrading of the water mains, the addition of a filtration system, and a water metering program too would be implemented later on. So in terms of what this would cost over the next 20 years, so the report did summarize what these upgrade costs would be. And as you can see, it's broken out into phases, but over the 20 years, it's estimating the upgrade cost to Eastside alone would be approximately $18 million. So it's important to note that this is an estimate. And as we have seen in the last year with many things, the costs associated with supply chain issues, inflation, as well as labor shortages could impact that cost. So this is just an estimate that we're providing tonight. Moving on to the next slide. So what does this mean for the customers of Eastside?
Holy fuck.
So as you can see, this rate structure as an example would be
Hi, sorry, Elena, you're on mute. Do you mind just unmuting your speaker?
Sorry about that. I didn't realize I had muted myself. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, and if you could just maybe start at that slide again, please. Eastside utility impact on customer rates.
Okay, sure. So what does just to go back, the study, as you recall in the previous slide, estimated a cost of $18 million over 20 years to fund these upgrades. So the rate structure that would be needed to fund these upgrades over the next 20 years for Eastside users would be, in addition to that annual user fee, which represents the operations and maintenance costs, a special levy or a capital charge would also be needed to fund these improvements. And the $6,800, as an example, would fund the 18 million over the next 20 years. So it's important to recognize that as a privately owned water system, it is 100% funded by users. The system would not be eligible for grant funding. That's not something that's available for private utilities, as well as there is no access to long-term borrowing. So the costs would need to be collected first in order to collect enough monies to proceed with these projects as we were to work through the different stages. So part of what the regulation of water utilities means is determining what is in the public interest. And the Deputy Comptroller considers that having the District of Lake Country be the water purveyor for Eastside Utility would be in the public interest. And having a district managed water system would benefit customers in several ways. The district has the knowledge of the area, the local expertise. There would be more funding options available to local government, such as being eligible for grants that would help offset these costs, as well as being able to borrow or look at long-term financing as an option. Another benefit potential would be for the expansion for future growth. As you know, there is currently a moratorium on expansion of Eastside service area, so this could be something that could be a potential. And lastly, there is the economies of scale, that being part of a larger service area would mean a larger customer base to spread out the costs. So that concludes our portion of the presentation tonight, and I'll hand it back over to Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. Next, we're going to hand it over to Kyle Wilkie, our Utilities Manager for the District of Lake Country's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. So part of my presentation, I'm going to give a quick history of the public water systems within the District of Lake Country and why they're given a quick explanation as to why there's very little public water systems out in the Carr's Landing area. Also, I'll give an overview of some of the work staff and council have been working on in terms of options to bring a public water system out into the, or a larger public water system out into the Carr's Landing area. I'm also going to advise on some of the policy related to the transfer of private infrastructure and advise on some of the legal framework related to the process. At the end, I think a lot of us are here just to receive some of the feedback from the group, and there are counselors in with this presentation, and they are listening to some of the feedback from the group. Next slide, please, Nick. So prior to incorporation in 1995, the district's water systems, the public water systems, were, well, there was private water systems and then there was irrigation districts. So in Oyama, we had the Oyama Irrigation District on the east bench of, the west bench of Oyama, and then on the east bench of Oyama, we had irrigation district called the Wood Lake Irrigation District. And then in the Winfield Okanagan Center, there was the Winfield Okanagan Center Irrigation District. These systems were all primarily built in the 1960s and early 1970s, and almost all growth to these systems since have been either paid for by development or a benefiting party that's expanding the system. In terms of the Water Master Plan, in 2020, Council initiated an update to the 2012 Water Master Plan. And so what is a Water Master Plan? So our Water Master Plan is one of our key documents, and it identifies initiatives related to new infrastructure and existing infrastructure. And then also it includes a financial plan to ensure adequate funding is received through the water rates. I think it's important to bring up that the water systems, the public-owned district water systems, are funded through primarily water rates. Developer cost charges are used also. That's contributions from development as development occurs, and also grant funding on certain projects where we're able to receive some grant funding when we're successful through that process. But the funding and operations of the water system and the improvements made are not funded from the tax base. Taxes are not used to fund the water system. So in the 2012 Water Master Plan, it identified the need for a servicing plan for the Carr's Landing area. Also, the Eastside engineering study identified the benefit of this being a public utility, and funding from the Eastside utility was provided to help develop this concept. And we worked with a consultant actually to go through a lot of the work on developing a concept and what it would look like to bring a public water system out into the area. So when we looked at the Carr's Landing area, we didn't just look at Eastside utility on its own, right? So just north of the Carr's Landing area, sorry, south of the Carr's Landing area, we have the Lake Pine water system. This is a district operated water system that we took over in 2012. North of that, we have the Barkley water user groups. This is a user group that has their own individual lake intakes down into Okanagan Lake. We group the private Carr's Landing area in green here. These are the properties that either have their own individual lake intake or a well which services their property. In yellow is the Eastside water utility. And then north of that is another satellite water system called the Coral Beach water system that's actually operated by the district since early 2000s. And one of the keys with developing a concept with this is to service the broader Carr's Landing area, not just Eastside utility, right? And two key reasons with that is it's very financially ineffective to run a water system or a small water system on its own, particularly one that's spread out with low densities. And then economies of scale also come into factor, meaning that if we are going into these areas and doing these improvements, more people paying for it makes it less expensive for everybody involved. So some of the key issues that were identified with servicing the Carr's Landing area: water quality, right? So there's some water quality in the Eastside utility area. Each year it seems to end up on a boil water notice, and then also some issues. So that was one of the issues we're looking to address with a servicing plan. Fire protection inadequacies. There is fire hydrants on the Eastside utility, but at the same time, there's not reservoir storage to adequately fight a larger scale fire. We do have a very good volunteer firefighting program out there, but the water system itself is very limited in that area. And then also, of course, to address some of the aging infrastructure issues that were identified in the Eastside utility plan. So we looked at three servicing options. One was to construct a new Okanagan Lake pump station that brings pumps water up to an existing reservoir on our Lake Pine water system. And then from there, we'd build infrastructure north out into the area. That was estimated to be approximately a $30 million construction project. To do that, the next methodology that we looked at was interconnecting our Lake Pine system to our Winfield Okanagan Center system. That's a Beaver Lake source primarily out in that area. And then we'd pump water from our Beaver Lake system up into that same Lake Pine reservoir, and then again extend service north into that area. That's a $20 million option. And we also looked at bringing water over from the lake subdivision into the area, and we ran into numerous problems around cost of upgrades and also land acquisition with that one. So that one was actually abandoned fairly early. And ultimately, staff did recommend to council option 2 being the preferred option of bringing water into the Carr's Landing area. So this is a quick overview of it. It does require some improvements along Carr's Landing Road where we currently have some of our water mains. There is an existing reservoir on the Lake Pine system. It's a large reservoir that is adequate for providing fire protection to the area. And then so we'd essentially build out from that reservoir north into the remaining area. So when considering the Carr's Landing servicing concept, there's 3 major considerations that really come into determining when a servicing strategy could take place. Of course, there's water quality concerns on our Beaver Lake source. The Beaver Lake source is on a permanent water quality advisory and will be until a water treatment plant is built. We're hopeful to have a water treatment plant built, but there's a lot of balls in play, let's say, in order to make that happen. And we're hoping to have that in place by 2025. The cost for this, none of this infrastructure is cheap, as you've seen with the dollar values that we're talking here. It's very expensive, and trying to determine how the project would be funded is very complicated. And when does the community and staff have the capacity to proceed with a project of this side? And these are all decisions that council needs to consider when considering how and when to implement this scale of a project. So onto council's policy around the expansion of our water system or bringing on a private water utility. So we have a policy known as the Water Restructure Policy 08100. It provides guidance in the takeover or acquisition of private water utilities or water systems expansion. It stipulates the standards that the infrastructure needs to be built to. So it references district bylaws and the standards that that infrastructure needs to be built to. And one of the key things in there of this policy is that joining user group pay the improvement costs, typically through formation of a local service area. And so there's good rationale behind this policy, and it expresses council's interest and desire to have a water utilities operated by the district or private water utilities operated by the district and taken over by the district. It ensures that the infrastructure is in good condition prior to that transfer, which entails then it doesn't add additional cost to the existing ratepayers. And so if there is any deviation from this policy, that ultimately is a council decision and not a staff decision. There have been some questions around grant funding and indications around grant funding. Would there be opportunity for grant funding with a project like this? And yes, there would be, but I say that with a big but, because the grant programs to fund a project of this size come out every 1 to 2 years typically, and the district has the ability to submit one application at a time. And we have some numerous initiatives under our existing infrastructure around expanding our wastewater treatment plant, building a treated wastewater outfall to Okanagan Lake to deal with our capacity issues down there, retrofit sewer in some key areas of the community we're looking to do, and then also a big one being building a treatment plant on our Beaver Lake source. So when considering the transferring a private water utility over the district, it does require electoral assent. And so the electoral assent process is basically, typically we do that through a local service area petition. And so I'll explain quickly what a local service area petition is. The next slide. So a municipality can expand services such as water and sewer within its community using a local service area process to pay for these improvements. It's typically, but not always, a council-initiated process. Local service areas are paid for in whole or in part by local property owners contained within the local service area. And so prior to this being approved, it actually will go out to petition or a vote amongst the property owners. And for a successful local service area petition, it requires 50% of the property owners must vote in favor. And then also 50% of the land value must vote in favor. So you can sometimes actually have an instance where 50% of the property owners will, more than 50% will vote in favor, but some of the higher value properties voted against it, and then it defeats the process. So some of our next steps, the goal with the Water Master Plan was to come up with a concept for the area and to gauge the interest of the Carr's Landing area in proceeding into a local service area. And really part of the next step would be council to initiate looking at funding strategies around that, timing around that. And so one of the big things with the Water Master Plan, we're really trying to gauge community interest and get input around this servicing strategy. We are asking people not only tonight to maybe provide some input verbally, but to participate in our Let's Talk Lake Country Water Master Plan survey that's online. There's parts in there where you can fill in, there's questions asked, and there's also parts where you can fill in and add comments. The survey will be open until June 10th. And after that, we'll convey the community survey findings to council, and ultimately council will decide if and when to initiate a local service area or to take the next steps around a servicing strategy into the Carr's Landing area. So with that, we will open it up for comments.
Great, thanks, Kyle. So great presentations. We're at 7:30, so we have lots of times for questions and answers. Again, I think we'll have that slide put up. Nick, if you don't mind, there's an email address there. It's communications@lakecountry.bc.ca. If you'd like to email a question, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I would just ask that you raise your virtual hand if possible, and we'll just see how many questions we get, and we'll go on whoever puts up their hand first. So I'll open it up to the audience. Great, thank you. I see some hands. Ryan and Cassandra, please. And if you could just unmute yourself.
Yeah, I put my question in the comment or the chat, but just with the annual user fee on that first slide, there was a $1,164 a year and $6,804 as a special levy. Are those, was the special levy a one-time charge, or would that be ongoing annually?
Elena, are you online?
Hi, yes, that would be me. So the annual special levy of $6,800, that would be an ongoing charge to fund those capital improvements. So it would not be a one-time, it would be ongoing.
Great, thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. If you could just maybe go on mute, please. We'll call on Ken Story. You're next, please.
Hi, thanks. So I just have some questions about the levy. So we have a $1,100 a month fee now going up $7,000 a year. Is that each person that's hooked up to the water system? So we're neighbors with, for example, you know, a fruit company and a winery building next door. So do they pay the same $1,100 I would pay? Thanks.
So the charges are represented per residential lot to the customers within the Eastside boundary. The commercial customers, such as the winery and the fruit company or farm, they would pay based on their equivalent to a single family lot. So, for example, if they are currently being charged 3 times the residential service rate, then their special levy would be prorated accordingly.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Ken?
It answers my question. It just sounds kind of outrageous, but thanks.
Thank you for the question. Next, we have Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you for the presentations there from both the district and the province there. I have 2 questions, one to the province and then one to the districts. The first one to the province is you'd mentioned that there was no borrowing facility available and that the funding would have to be in place before any work commences. So looking at the annual special levy and working off the numbers that you gave earlier for the number of properties that are covered on Eastside, that gives you 1.075 million per year. So if I'm understanding it correctly, in order to start on stage 1, you would have to collect 5 years of levy before the work could commence. Is that correct, or did I misunderstand?
So in order to fund the different phases, those monies would need to be collected up front.
So we wouldn't be able to start on stage 1 for 5 years until there was 5 years of levy collected? Well, and then it would be 15 years to collect the next 15 million to start on stage 2 and stage 3?
Well, those would be broken down into further smaller projects. So for example, in the first 5 years, the lake intake would be the first project. The monies would be collected for that. And then going through, as we collected the monies through the special levies, then we would be able to fund other projects going forward.
But do you need 4 million in the bank for year one? So you have to collect it beforehand, because you said you have to collect the monies in advance.
So at this stage, we are here just to be gathering information and collecting feedback from customers to see what the interest is in terms of a transfer occurring to the District of Lake Country.
Okay.
In year one, the $5 million would not be collected all at one stage. It would be phased in gradually.
Okay. Thank you. My second question is to the district, and this comes from a meeting that we council had last week and a comment that was made from the Eastside Utilities Management team that they would not cover fire protection for any subdivided lots. So my question would be, the issues facing Eastside are, as Kyle had highlighted, 3 key issues, one of which is fire protection. So fire protection from Eastside's hydrants covers members of the Carr's Landing community that are not Eastside customers. So be it people along Berkeley or who are not part of the Eastside utilities, so further to the south, or lakeside properties or properties on Charolais, Angus, and the other roads up there. So my question would be, given the benefit which is going to be brought about by the fire protection flows increasing and the hydrant pressure increased, would that cost still be borne 100% by Eastside Utilities customers, although there is a wider benefit to the Carr's Landing community in having improved fire protection?
So I believe your question is that if we were to expand the water system out as shown into the broader Carr's Landing area, would that cost for bringing in the larger fire protection be borne solely by Eastside Utility? And if that is the question, then no, it would not. It'd be borne entirely by that group. And so one thing I did forget to mention, so Eastside Utility is approximately 150 customers there. This broader group is approximately 325 customers that would be going towards paying for that $18 to $20 million 2021 cost we're talking to bring the infrastructure out into that area.
So effectively over doubling the amount of customers, and therefore potentially halving the amount that has to be borne by each individual residence.
That's correct.
That's fantastic. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you for the question. Once you've asked your question, if you could just put your hand down, please. Ken, I noticed you, unless you have another question, that's totally fine, but maybe you could just lower your hand. Next, we have Shelley Ale.
Oh, hi. Good evening. Excellent presentation. It's David Ale, Shelley's husband. I just wanted to confirm, and I think the last question was answered it, but just wanted to confirm that the numbers being presented in terms of the cost per lot relate to the utility remaining privately owned, as opposed to being transferred to the district. Is that correct? So if it is transferred to the district, based on what you've just said, the cost would be shared by 325 as opposed to 150 lots. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if we were to expand out into the Carr's Landing area as the previous graph had shown, it would be borne by that area, and Eastside Utility would come in if it went through a successful assent process where people voted in favor of it. It would become part of the public water utility. And so it would no longer be a private water utility, and then also the cost, however that is determined to be distributed amongst that area, it would be divided up amongst the number of properties that are benefiting in that area.
And as well, there would be the opportunity to obtain outside financing, perhaps government financing or government grants for the project as well.
Yeah, the way it works is if we apply for a grant to work on a private utility, that private utility, once that expenditure is done, then needs to be transferred over to a public system. And so there would be opportunity for grants potentially, but as I mentioned in one of my slides, I say that with caution, just because there's only a certain number of grants out there. There's a number of key projects already identified that the district is looking to undertake on existing infrastructure, existing public infrastructure, and where this project fits in is still a little hard to determine.
So that determination and the prioritization of those types of projects is determined by whom?
Council ultimately sets those. We come to council for a resolution on which grant we're going after, and a lot of times staff will make a recommendation, but ultimately council has the final say on what project we apply for.
All right, and just one final question before I lower my hand. What is, if any, the downside of going public versus remaining private?
I can't think of a good one, to be honest with you. The one thing is that going public will be able to phase it in potentially over time, do these projects over time, and yeah, I don't have a very good answer around what's the benefits of remaining private versus public.
No, that's fair. I didn't see any either, so I appreciate your response, and thanks again for the presentation.
Thanks for the question. Next is Councillor Gamble.
Thanks, thanks, Ruth. Yeah, great presentation. And I just wanted to say that from my understanding that if the district would take over the system, it was my understanding that then the Eastside utilities or the community involved, if it's bigger than Eastside, could then take advantage of long-term borrowing. And maybe we could just verify that, because if that is the case, I'm just wondering what would that do to the cost? Would that, or certainly it would facilitate the actualization of the system much sooner. But maybe we could just hear a little bit more about that, because that was one of the things that was mentioned with the difference between being part of the District of Lake Country or continuing to be private and the province administering.
Sure, and I can take that one as well. And I was hoping to have actually our Chief Financial Officer here today, but unfortunately he wasn't available. But yeah, a private utility becomes a public utility or gets absorbed by the District of Lake Country. We do have the ability to borrow in order to facilitate capital improvements. And when one of the benefits of borrowing is that we can deliver that in a faster manner, just like you had alluded to there, Councillor Gamble. And that really has a big benefit in the terms of we can deliver these projects faster and not be subject to some of the market forces like inflation.
Great, thanks for the question, Councillor Gamble. Next we have Ken Story again.
Bruce, sorry, I just maybe want to add some information that, of course, when we borrow, we have to have the carrying cost, right? There's an interest charge that comes with that. So when we advance things sooner, that's advantageous, but it does come with an additional cost burden to pay the interest on top of the principal. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that. Ken, you're next.
Okay, so this is kind of a out there question, but they're looking at rearranging the federal riding and in Lake Country and dividing Lake Country versus keeping Lake Country together. So my question is, if some of this potential grant money to help us repair our water system is coming from the federal government, is it in our best interest to keep Lake Country riding together? So I'll leave that with you for a second to speculate. I don't know if it's within your purview.
I'll do my best to answer that one. So a lot of the times these are the grant programs that we apply for are very prescribed. And so the conditions of they basically say this percentage of money is coming from the federal government, this percentage of the money will come from the provincial government, and the remaining costs will be borne by the applicant. And so there's a whole scoring system that it goes through, and then there's even actual further approval process that it goes through with the province and the federal government. To my knowledge, I do not believe there's any process where they look at the boundary of the area in when saying whether a grant will be successful or not.
Thanks for the question, Ken.
Just in
Greg,
sort
go
of
ahead.
further to that, the typically the grants, though, I was saying it's usually a third traditionally. More recently, the feds have been putting up 50% of the money, the province puts up a third, and then the remainder is borne by the applicant. So you know, that makes it even better from a community perspective when we're successful on those grants. The grants are always overprescribed, so it's a competitive process to get the grants. The grants are awarded by the province, so the feds puts the money up, their portion, but they allow the province then to do the scoring and to select the successful projects. The feds really don't get involved in that. So that's kind of how the grant process, but they're always overprescribed, oftentimes by a factor of 2 or more. So they're definitely not guaranteed by any means. Even if we establish a priority project, it doesn't mean we're going to be successful on the district. So they're not guaranteed.
Thanks, Greg. Ken, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks everybody. That's interesting.
Great, thank you. Next, we have Timothy.
Thank you. I have 2 questions, and I may have missed the beginning part here. If it stays on the public side or private and the province is the administrator of it, is there a timeline for upgrading these sort of things, or what's the province projected timeline to have to do something with Eastside Utility as the administrator?
Well, okay, hello, I can answer a little bit for this question. So far, the main principle for us is like we try to operate and maintain as it is if everything goes well. So we only kind of like take some action if some really health-related issue happened. For example, the Eastside customer kind of suffered 3 continuous years of boil water advisory in summertime since 2017 or 18. So we're kind of working on to upgrade the intake the system intake, because the existing intake has the shallow and is too close to the beach, so it's suffering some like turbidity issues. So we try to extend the intake to a little bit further and deeper the intake location. So hopefully this project will improve the raw water quality from the lake. So the next plan, we haven't decided yet. So we have to consult with district if they have any kind of better advice for the capital improvement plan, if they think that's necessary. And in another issue is if the house, they issue an order to push the utility to upgrade the system, that will consider that's the higher priority for us to take some actions, and then we will plan accordingly.
Excellent, thank you. I'm glad to see someone's looking at moving the shallow water intake, which most longtime residents recognize has been the issue with turbidity for the longest time. And that would be a relatively cheaper fix, I would assume, rather than millions that I've been hearing here. Second question, thank you. Second question, one of the slides talked about one of the ways that the district would take it over would be through council, through like a special motion through council. So has council ruled over taking over this private utility because of the costs, and they will only do it if the cost is borne by the immediate servicing residents versus some of the other capital projects that council has done for smaller areas?
No, council has not initiated any process for takeover. All we're really looking at right now is a high level concept of how we might service the area broader, and if trying to gauge if there's interest in the takeover. One of the comments that you mentioned there, though, just deepening the intake is going to solve a lot of the problems on that area, and it is far more than just that. With the Eastside utility, not only does it have water quality issues related to the depth of that intake, but there's reservoirs that are undersized. Much of the infrastructure is nearing the end of useful life. And so there's some pretty major expenditures on top of just deepening the intake out in that area.
Greg?
And just to clarify the council policy, and council has the ability to modify policy. But the policy right now is such that on the takeover or the transfer, accepting the transfer of private utilities, that those utilities must be brought up to district standards with the transfer. And so that lays out a course of action where, you know, that money needs to be up front. And so that policy is intended to ensure that, you know, liability is not taken over, that now is expanded out beyond those benefiting parties. It does present some challenges, though, because the order of magnitude that we're talking about in terms of the improvements that need to be made and just the scale of things is really not well suited to a fix and done kind of solution. So I think it's likely that council would need to consider how these things would be undertaken over time and strategically. And so you could spread those costs over and ideally position some of the higher cost improvements to when, you know, we could be successful in getting some grant funding support. So those are some of the things that still need to be sorted out in terms of the, you know, the exact implementation plan, if you will, and that council would have to authorize. But for sure, there are a number of things there. The systems are getting old. They don't last forever. They don't fix themselves, and infrastructure is expensive. So those challenges are going to persist and are going to need to be addressed, whether that's done through, you know, the private or a public system.
Thanks, Greg. Next is Ryan and Cassandra.
I've got a couple of questions, I guess. I'm new to the area, but it seems like this issue has been ongoing for over 24 years without a whole lot of change. My concern is that this is just a never ending, we're just going to keep talking in circles for 20 more years and still be in the same position, but it is what it is. My question, out of all of these water systems, you've got Coral Beach, Eastside, Barkley, Private Carrs, and Lake Pine water system. Out of those 5 water systems, how many are not run by the district currently? Is it just Eastside Utility?
Yeah, so the private Carr's Landing area are actually all individual properties with their own system. So whether that's an intake in the lake or a well on the property. Barclay Water User Group has their own individual lake intakes, and I believe they potentially run it as a bit of a water society. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it is a private, private infrastructure. Eastside Utility, as we know, is a private water utility. Coral Beach on the north, and then Lake Pine Water Utility on the south are 2 satellite systems that are operated by the district.
And with the memorandum areas, is it just the residential lots in the Eastside Utility area that have that memorandum, or all of these?
I'm not understanding with the memorandum what.
Sorry,
The moratorium, I think.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, for not being able to further extend or build on your property. Is it just on the Eastside Utility?
Yes, it is. Well, I know for Eastside, there is a moratorium in place.
There is a defined boundary on both the Lake Pine water system and the Coral Beach water system also that can't be exceeded without bringing up the infrastructure that's being expanded up to current standards also.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Ken, you're next.
Thank you. So I guess my next question is, if we could tap into one of the other systems, we could probably replace Eastside Utility for less than $18 million. Has that been considered? Thanks, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, it has. And so it doesn't work. The only other system to tap into is the Coral Beach water system, and it is facing very similar problems as Eastside Utility. It does not have adequate fire protection. A lot of the infrastructure in that area is nearing end of useful life, and nor does it have the capacity or hydraulic grade lines to supply the area. So ultimately, in order to service the broader area, we would need to look to expand basically from either build a new reservoir, but we already do have a reservoir on the southern border in the Lake Pine Water Utility, and that made the most sense for us to expand north from that system. And that's what we've recommended thus far.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ken, for the questions. I don't see any other hands up, so we'll just give it 30 seconds and see if anyone else has any questions. I'm checking my email, and I haven't received any questions there. Great. Frank, you're next. You're just going to have to unmute yourself, Frank. Okay, I see, Frank, your hand went down. So maybe you can type in the chat. I see your hand's back up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
I can, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Had a camera issue. So the Eastside customers, are they basically looking at $18 million regardless of whether they stay private or join Lake Country?
Yeah, so I think I can answer a little bit of that on behalf of the province. So it does appear that the province will need to make these improvements to the water system if it stays private. So that's looking at, okay, that group is going to have to pay for that. But the strategy we're looking at is broader than this Eastside Utility, which is approximately a $19 to $20 million project, but that's borne by greater number of properties, about 325 rather than the 150, to bring water out into the area, and that would be spread amongst all those properties rather than just Eastside, if it was to go through the appropriate process.
Right, but isn't there a major upgrade for Beaver Lake? And Eastside would be a part of that then as well? Is that true?
Not currently, no.
But the Beaver Lake does have an upgrade being planned, doesn't it?
The water treatment plant, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're building a water treatment plant, and so customers connected to that source would benefit from that.
Benefit and pay for that.
Correct.
Okay. And what's the cost of that?
The water treatment plant?
Yes.
Initially we were budgeting $50 to $60 million for that project, but right now with current market conditions, it's looking like it potentially could be higher than that, but we're still trying to figure out the price of that project 100%.
So the cost for Eastside though to stay on Okanagan Lake is only $10 million more, right?
I think you're getting some projects.
To put in new pumps is $30 million. Interconnect to Pine Lake is $19 million. So there's only $10 million more for Eastside to get its own pumps and stay on Okanagan. Do I understand that right?
No, you don't. So on option 1 is building an Okanagan Lake pump station to service just that single area out in Carr's Landing. Option 2 is extending north from an existing reservoir out there. We're going to build that water treatment plant irregardless if either of these options proceed. That's just strictly looking at bringing out the infrastructure to service that area.
Okay. So the $30 million for the pump station is just the pump station. That's not water treatment as well.
There would be treatment, but not a water treatment plant, no.
Okay. I'm just wondering what I'm missing here is what's the cost to an Eastside customer to stay private, and what's the cost to an Eastside customer to join District of Lake Country? And I'm missing that second one.
Nick, could you show
is it all the same $18 million to Eastside?
Could you go to the annual levy slide?
I think the problem, Kyle, is we don't have an annual levy for a district public system so that they can compare. Right. And we haven't prepared that. It's something that needs to be done. And you're absolutely right. It's a key component of the decision-making process. One of the big unknowns with that is, what kind of grant support we could foresee. And there's also, as I discussed earlier, we'd have to confirm with council that they're comfortable with a phased approach to improvements, which is not aligned with the current policy. So it would require a policy amendment, if you will. Those cost numbers would need to come out and would be calculated when we do if we're looking at the local service area. So when the actual vote happens, those costs are specified, stipulated, and are then they can't change afterwards. So we've got to make sure we get those costs correct, and that information will definitely be available at the time of the local service area. We could likely do some work in advance to try and get some numbers there. There's so many variabilities right now. It's difficult to specify, and I know that's not exactly answering what you're looking for, but I hope it at least explains how it would proceed.
Well, all we know right now is that on today's snapshot, staying private is going to cost $8,000 annually for the next, what, 20 years? Is that right?
Yep.
And so that compared to joining Lake Country, and in that cost, you'd have to phase in, Beaver Lake somewhere in those 20 years and all the other costs. So we do need that 8,000 compared to what?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how else can you make a decision?
So Councillor Reid did do the quick math on it, and she's, again, the prices that we're using here are ballpark numbers. They're Class D cost estimates.
I understand. Yeah. It's
But
just a snapshot in time. Yeah.
if you take a look at 20 million divided by 150 users versus 20 million divided by 325 users, it's a cheaper aspect.
Agreed. But what if Beaver Lake is $100 million?
So the Beaver Lake treatment plant will be paid for using the existing rate structure, and the program is not going to be put onto the Eastside utility or the Carr's Landing area.
Yeah, we would expect that annual user fee portion would cover that.
Okay.
And the special levy, whatever that would need to be, would be above and beyond. And that I could probably state that treatment plant, that Beaver Lake treatment plant, will not go forward without grant support. It's too expensive. So if we're not successful, the grant money's on there, that project would not go forward.
Okay, so the numbers are $8,000 over 153 customers versus $8,000 over 350. Is that?
But I mean, the other part of this is, having that ability to get grant monies as we go through. So we typically do this with a lot of our larger infrastructure projects. We say these are grant dependent projects. They do not advance without grants. And so, it's likely that we might do that with some, here too, that, okay, well, when we're doing the infrastructure renewal points, replacing that 10 kilometers of lines with the reservoir upgrades, that's probably 3/4 of the cost here. That would be done when at such time as the grant fundings become available. So it comes down to a financing strategy. And what we haven't completed yet is a financing strategy. Typically, whenever we do our infrastructure plans, we create a financial model that goes with it that establishes when things happen, obviously how much those cost and how they're going to be funded. And then that gets transferred back onto the individual rates to the customers. I think what we can state here pretty confidently right now, it would be at least half of what you're paying now, or in that range, and potentially quite a bit lower with grant support.
Okay.
Not half of what you're paying now, half of what this sustainable
half of the 20
structure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to, I don't know if it's possible to firm up at least some probability of grant, I guess, because that would impact this potentially quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Frank. Next is Barry. Thanks for your patience, Barry. You've had your hand up for a while. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi. Thanks for the great presentations. One quick question regarding the Eastside change for the intake. The cost, who is carrying the cost for that? For the province, I assume? Who can speak to that?
So just for double confirm, so you mean the intake project?
Correct. If they would utilize that to change it to another location.
Not change to another location. It's just using the existing one. We just want to extend the line further and make it the intake, the screen point a little bit deeper so that we can have a better water quality from the lake.
And who is carrying the cost for that? The province?
No, the customer. So we do still have some reserve fund available in the utilities account. So the existing balance can cover the cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Barry. Next, we have Councillor Reid.
Sorry, I was just, I left my hand up. It was in connection with the calculations that Frank was asking for. So I did put it, as Carr said, I did put it in the chat. But if we do the calculation based on 19 million divided by 20 years, divided by 325 users, then the annual levy works out at $2,923.07 per residential lot, assuming that the whole of Carr's Landing is included and votes in favour of the local service area. And as Greg pointed out, if there would be grant funding available, then that annual levy could be lower, although that is based on 2021 costs. So I don't know whether we can talk about maybe a timeline, how long it would take to us to get to the point of discussing a local service area and what the steps are to that, so we can get an idea of the time frames that we're talking about would be quite helpful.
Yeah, and so if the indication from the area is that they want to proceed with this, then so what we would look to do is next do a local service area initiative or a study and put that into next year's budget. And so that's where we'll actually go into greater depth, analyzing how we could run the water lines, their alignments, what they're going to cost, and then we would take that and is there a phased approach and really look at all the options and discuss with council and best case scenario maybe later next year, or it could potentially be longer than that.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
Thank you.
Ken, you're next.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm fairly new to the area, so I have a couple questions related to this. We have a water problem throughout Lake Country. We have different areas of Carr's Landing that have similar water problems. We're spending $30 million on water treatment facility. And if I'm listening clearly to your provincial representatives, we're going to try to knock these off year after year on grant programs. So like we're going to tackle the Beaver Lake water treatment facility first, but we're working on the pump for Eastside customers. I guess my question is, why don't we have a master water plan that encompasses the entire Lake Country? So that's my question. I'm going to let you guys tackle that.
Yeah, and so ultimately the water master plan, that's what it is for the existing users. And then part of that, we do look at some system expansion options. And one of the things that's been directed or part of the terms of reference around that is looking out into like the greater Carr's Landing area, for example, with this. So yeah, typically our plans, because they're funded by the user group, you look at how to sustainably deliver water to those user groups and potential expansion of it. And that's what a lot of this planning is.
Ken, did that answer your question?
No, actually. I guess my question is, why don't we have, you know, we're dividing user groups, I guess is what we're saying here, and each user group is going to line up and end up with different costs. I guess, what if we took all of the population of Lake Country and tried to develop a water plan over the next 10 or 15 years that would encompass Lake Country? I guess that's my question.
We do have that. I think that's what Kyle was saying. That's exactly what we do have. What we're looking at with this is bringing a servicing strategy into Carr's Landing that fits in with the broader master planning process for the systems that the district now operates. So we've had a water master plan, and they're typically 20-year plans that look out even 50 years. Because infrastructure, buried pipe and that will last a long time. Since 2002, we updated in 2012. In the 2012 update, one of the recommendations was to consider a servicing strategy for Carr's Landing. We're currently updating the water master plan now and undertaking that recommended step of creating a servicing plan for Carr's Landing that fits in and would bring the Carr's Landing area in under the overall umbrella. And so that is there. I think one of the policy related aspects of that is those users on the existing systems have been customers of the district for a long time, and they have made a lot of investments already. So the idea being that the new systems, private systems, would have to take care of their deficiencies upon, as terms of entering in. And but the idea once you get there is you get a rate stability, and typically the local service area then would be is typically done on a parcel tax or some types of tax for the cost recovery on the improvements that are needed, that would last until those improvements are completed, usually a 20-year term.
Thanks, Greg. Ken, go ahead.
Are you aware of anybody in British Columbia that faces a 8-fold increase in their water bill?
I know I have been involved. So I before I came to the district, I worked in consulting. I worked with a lot of different communities where they were facing similar challenges, very, very costly. In a lot of cases, those systems that we were working on had completely failed. You could be weeks at a time without water. Turn the tap on, nothing comes out. I can tell you when that type of thing is happening, people line up with their checkbook very, very quickly. It's not a good place to be. How do you even live in your home at that point? But yeah, we recognize the challenges here. But as I think as district staff, we're trying to address a situation that exists, and how do we best do that?
Thanks, Ken, for the questions. Ryan and Cassandra. Thanks, Ken. Ryan and Cassandra, you had your hand up for a bit there, and I didn't get to you. Did you maybe raise your hand if you'd like to speak again? Other than that, we'll go to Councillor Gamble. Go ahead, Councillor Gamble.
Oh, thank you. I'm just, hearing the discussion. I have to say, I was on council when the water master plan, the first original large one, was developed. I think it was around 2012, and I have been on the water committee over those years. And I have to say, I have been very impressed with our community. Seeing Kelowna, a much, much bigger community, who did not have the vision of bringing a number of different water utilities into one. And we certainly have done that in Lake Country for the larger utilities. We have the Oyama Lake system, we have the Beaver Lake system, and we have the larger Okanagan Lake system that is the more recent one that we are using. And having grown up in this community and seen fish in my irrigation lines on the farm, when I was a kid doing changing the irrigation pipes, I have to say that we have come a huge, huge distance. And we now have a system that is amazing here. Yes, we don't have that system out in Carr's Landing at this point. And I think a lot of that has happened really kind of, I would say incidentally, that people really want to live out in Carr's Landing. The water system just wasn't able to expand out there. So people put in their own private systems, and they were allowed to build with those systems. But just getting back to the water master plan, we had a clear plan and system of upgrading our water, and have put in things like we started with a run-of-the-river generation system that actually puts energy back into our community, and provides enough power for about 300 homes, 250 to 300 homes. We have put in metering throughout all the new development it's everywhere now in our community, in this under the water master plan. We have UV facilities that we're putting in. We've built huge reservoirs for our larger systems. And we're now in the process of doing a dam upgrade in the next year or two on Beaver Lake system. There's a lot of operational costs. So I just want to say that we have a wonderful water system in Lake Country. It doesn't go far enough. I agree. And I totally hear what people are saying. But, I think the reality is that those areas of Carr's Landing moved ahead and they put in private systems. Now we're in a situation where a lot of those private systems are old and need to be upgraded. We're all facing this upgrading because new standards are in place today. And so we're struggling with how to get through it. The question that comes back to me is, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the people of the Carr's Landing area to decide whether or not they want to go into a public system. Council can't force that. We can lead the question, we can bring it to the people, but it is up to those citizens to decide, what they want for their area and how they want to go about it. But there are definite benefits to being in a public system, and that comes from the funding, I think, is one of the things. And of course, the upgrades that have to be done and that are being done.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble. Ken, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if that's left over from the last question or if you had anything, another question you wanted to ask the presenters. Nope, I see your hand. Oh, Ken, go ahead.
But that I'll take my hand down.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more hands. I'll just give it another couple seconds. Please feel free to ask a question now if you have one. Otherwise, you'll notice in the chat, I've put some links. So as mentioned on the slides there that Kyle put up and went through, as next steps, we really are encouraging everyone to please fill out the survey. The survey will be open until June 10th, and I put in the chat the link to the website. Also to please sign up for district news. We won't send you junk. We won't sell your email address to anyone. You will only receive district news. So please subscribe. That is the only way we can reach out to you if you're not monitoring Let's Talk or our website. It's not just about the water master plan, but it's about emergencies that we're facing in the district. It's a quick way for us to communicate with citizens in the community. So again, lakecountry.bc.ca/subscribe. Very important that you do that. So please take a moment to do that. And I've also put my email address. So if anyone has any questions, concerns, needs links to anything, please, again, feel free to reach out, and I will not necessarily know the answer, but we'll certainly find it. So I see Councillor Reid, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I just wondered whether you wanted to quickly speak to tomorrow's meeting at Council Chambers at 7 with the Carr's Landing Community and Recreation Association.
Excellent, thank you. So as Councillor Reid mentioned, we do have another meeting scheduled for tomorrow. If anyone in the Carr's Landing ward or anyone actually in Lake Country would like to attend, you're welcome to. I'll maybe turn it over to Kyle to talk through the agenda. It will not be on this topic of Eastside utility. Kyle will be presenting many of the slides you saw already today, but feel free to come to council chambers if you would like to attend in person, or you can get the link on the council calendar on our website and join just like you did tonight. So Kyle, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, tomorrow's presentation will be very similar to the one I gave, but it won't be so specific just to Eastside utility. It'll be more broader, aimed at the Carr's Landing area. And I believe there's also a presentation by our director of parks and community development as well, a short presentation prior.
Great, thank you. I see we do have a question in the chat, and maybe I'll just read it. It says, if and when a new system is put into place, would council be a little more lenient in approving more subdividing of lots and increase the number of residential lots contributing to the levy? Kyle, did you want to take that?
I don't know if I should speak for council, but so one of the big things when subdividing a lot, what it looks at is our subdivision development servicing bylaw. And one of the key aspects of that when you subdivide a lot is having the ability to connect to a public water system. And if you don't, you need council's permission to not have a public water system or to use a well or something like that, right? And so it's definitely beneficial in that sense that if there is the availability from water to subdivide your lot, you're more likely to receive approval.
Great, thank you. Councillor Reid?
I would also add that Eastside utilities through the province have placed a moratorium on expanding due to fire protection. So it's, as well as Kyle's absolutely right in the connection to a water system, it is also in being able to provide adequate fire protection that does not degrade the level of protection that's available to the current users by adding existing lots. And I think the presentation from Kyle and Greg highlighted that fire protection would be one of those aspects that would be tackled under the district's plan. So I would say that would be another tick in the box in terms of being able to service additional subdivision.
Great, thank you, Councillor Reid. Ken, I see you put in the chat that you can't make the meeting tomorrow, so we will be recording that one as well. Please make note of my email address that's in the chat, and if you don't see it on Let's Talk Lake Country or the council meeting agendas, please feel free to just send me an email and I'll send you links. And that goes for anyone who just can't find what they're looking for, whether it's documents, links, the video, what have you. Please feel free to reach out and I'm happy to get that for you. So I don't see any more hands. Thank you so much to the province for attending this evening. Did you have any concluding comments? Sorry, Elena, I didn't ask before, but if you do, maybe I'll hand the mic over to you. If not, we'll just again thank everyone for, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting us to this meeting tonight. It's great that we're doing this and able to participate, and we look forward to the feedback from customers as well as from the district as well. Thanks again.